Stanley Cup Playoffs 2019 are upon us, and I am super excited for this one. I think that these playoffs will be a lot of fun. There's a lot of really good matchups. I think the teams this year are really good, and in the first round especially, actually, there's some really tight matchups. It really could have been the conference finals. I think if you predicted what the conference finals would be at the beginning of the year, I guess the new playoff format, or it's not really new, but the current playoff format doesn't really allow for sometimes the best conference finals and often allows for first and second round matchups being completely unfair. But that being said, I do think that it's going to be an interesting year for sure. There's a lot of storylines. There's a lot of teams that are trying to prove stuff. There's a lot of players nearing the end of their career. A lot of new faces on the block. A lot of veteran faces. Teams that want to win multiple cups. Teams that want to win their first. Franchises that have never come close, that are really trying to come close. Expansion teams who are trying to repeat the glory of last year. There's a lot of storylines this year, and I think it's going to be an interesting Stanley Cup playoffs. But let's start off with the first round. So the first matchup I'll talk about is Tampa Bay versus Columbus. I really don't think this is close, and it's not just because Tampa is a really good team and Columbus barely snuck in. The problem is that Tampa is probably more dominant against Columbus than any team in the league. Like, I look at the last couple years of Lightning games, and Columbus is the one game that's basically always penciled in to be a win because Tampa really does dominate this team. They won their first game against them 5-1 this year, then finished it with an 8-2 win and a 4-0 win. So, yeah, it was just completely dominant for the Lightning, and I think that the Blue Jackets do have a fair bit of strife. It is noticeable that there is some strife, especially with Panarin possibly leaving, Bobrovsky possibly leaving, Duchesne possibly leaving. In fact, I'd say all three are likely to leave. It's going to be interesting. I think that they're definitely a team on their last legs, and I think that they're not going to be a playoff contender going into the next year, which is really interesting. But I think at the end of the day, the Lightning do clean up in 4. I think this will be one of the easiest series in the first round. All right, next up we have Toronto versus Boston. This one I'm going to give the Maple Leafs in 7. I think I'm the only person to pick this, and it's weird because I'm definitely not a Leafs fan at all. But I really, really like the Leafs' chances here. I think that, yes, the Bruins are the better team, and the Bruins beat them last year, and consistently the Bruins beat them. But it's been close, and last year's series wasn't as close as maybe a Game 7 series should be, in that Boston definitely controlled a lot of the games. But the Leafs have improved. I know people like to make fun of some of the Leafs' tendencies and some of the mistakes they make and some of the potential strife there and the whole situation with Nylander. But they added John Tavares, and I think John Tavares really wants to experience the playoffs, and I think that'll put up a large fight. I also think that Frederik Andersen's ready to redeem himself. I think Boston looks really good, and I think it'll be really close, but ultimately I think that the Leafs improved themselves more than Boston, and I think it's about time that the Leafs do something in the playoffs, and I really do think that John Tavares will be able to lead this team past the first round. All right, let's move on to the next matchup. Next up, we have Washington versus Carolina. This is really weird, but I actually think that Carolina will put up a really big fight in these playoffs. I think that they will fight to win this series. I don't think they will, but I really do think that Washington and Carolina is going to be an interesting matchup. I think with Carolina, they're really a defensive-based team, and they also apply a lot of pressure. They take a lot of shots. They're a very possession-based team. They're one of the best possession teams in the league and have been consistently for the past years. Even when they weren't a contending team or even a playoff team, they really were a top possession team. They just had the issues with goaltending, and the goaltending has improved. Mrazek and McElhinney have been an all-right duo. Ultimately, though, the Washington Capitals are, of course, going to win this one. They're one of the best hockey teams in the world. I think they're one of the best hockey teams of all time right now. They are an amazing club, and they have some great players and great leadership from Ovechkin and Backstrom. So they do win, but I think the Hurricanes, especially making it into the playoffs for the first time in a long time, will put up a fight here. Anyways, let's move on to the next round. Okay, so next matchup, I guess you should say, Pittsburgh versus New York Islanders. This one is not going to be close. I really think the Islanders were a bit of a fluke making it in because even though they were really dominant for a period of time, they also started coming back down to earth and started falling down the standings a little bit. I will say this. I think that the Penguins are a really good team, and they've proved that multiple times. And I really think that there's a lot going on good there. I think Matt Murray will prove himself to be a playoff goalie. And if there's one team in the history of the NHL that has gotten scorched by Sidney Crosby, it is the New York Islanders. He is on fire every time he plays them, and the Montreal Canadiens. But I definitely think that he is going to go into Long Island and they're going to win a bunch of games and it'll be out in 5. And I think that the Penguins will move on like they usually do in the first round, and they will do it with ease because that's the Penguins right now. They take the first round with ease. All right, let's move on to the next matchup. This is probably my most controversial pick. I have the Avalanche beating the Calgary Flames in 7. So it's weird because the Calgary Flames, a lot of people are saying, this is one of the best hockey teams we've seen in a long time. If this was any other year, they would be so dominant, but it's because of the Lightning, they can't be the best team in the league. For me personally, the thing I see with this is that there is an obvious lack of goaltending. Mike Smith has improved, but he definitely had a weak season, and Rittich isn't a starter by any means. In the meantime, not only has Grubauer improved, but Grubauer has shown to be a very, very good goalie. He has been elite in the past few weeks. And the Avalanche have also dealt with a lot of injuries and a lot of issues there, while a lot of the Flames kind of went on a bit of a slump near the end. The Avalanche had to fight to get into the playoffs. The Flames kind of coasted and didn't look that good. I think it could go either way myself, but I think there will be one big upset in the first round. And why not Colorado? Because I really think this Colorado team could do a lot more than the standings showed, because we have an insane top line and we have some really good goaltending back there. All right, next up we have San Jose versus Vegas. Why is this a first round matchup? I'm going to take Vegas in this one. I think that this one is close, and I think at the beginning of the season I did have San Jose penned in as a potential cup winner. I think I had them losing to Washington in the finals. I think the thing is with San Jose is ultimately I really do believe that they are lacking in the goaltending. While Vegas makes up for it with Marc-Andre Fleury. Marc-Andre Fleury is an elite goaltender, especially come playoffs. He's a playoff goalie. He has 3 Stanley Cup wins, and he had last year's insane playoff push, which was just crazy good. I know he had a few cold years of not being the best playoff goalie, but Marc-Andre Fleury in the playoffs is seriously awesome. Plus, their top line, their Marchessault, Carlson, and all that have been playing phenomenally lately. Oh yeah, and then they added Mark Stone, who's basically Phil Kessel, but with elite defense. Plus Pacioretty, plus Stasny. They're just such a good team. I'm going to take them in 7. All right, next up we have Nashville versus Dallas. Okay, so for me, Nashville versus Dallas is not a close series at all. And I think Dallas is probably the weakest team in the playoffs. I really do think that Ben Bishop kind of carried the team. I really like Ben Bishop, and I think he is a fantastic goalie. And I think he can do stuff in the playoffs, but ultimately they are going up against the Predators, who are becoming a playoff team. They've experienced the playoffs, and they have fought hard each year, making it to the Stanley Cup Finals in 2017, and then losing in the second round in 2016 and 18, but to extremely, insanely good teams in the San Jose Sharks, who made the finals, and the Jets, who probably would have made the finals if they weren't beat down by the Predators. I think you're comparing the weakest team in here, apart from Bishop, because none of the guys really had outstanding seasons, and there's a lot of cold spots, to Nashville, who's a very tested and very, very good team. I think Nashville takes it in 5. I was tempted to say 4, but I'm going to say 5, but it's not going to be close. I think Nashville definitely is going to take this one. All right, and finally we have the Jets versus the Blues. Interestingly enough, I think there's multiple points in this season where I think either one of these teams looked like a Stanley Cup champion. And it's crazy to think about that, because had the Predators not won that game, we could have seen a St. Louis versus Winnipeg second round potentially instead of a first round, because I really do think that either one of these teams would probably beat the Predators in the first round. For me, I'm going to take the Jets. I think the Jets is definitely looking like the Jets' year. I know 2020 next year is definitely going to be the year where the Jets probably win the Cup, but I think the Jets really know that, and I think the Blues are not consistently a great playoff team. While the Jets did pull a pretty good run up until they faced Vegas in the third round, they were definitely looking like a possible Stanley Cup champion. I'm just really excited to see playoff hockey in Winnipeg again, because last year was a lot of fun. The whiteout and the energy of that arena, it's just unlike anything I'd seen before, and I really loved playoff hockey in Winnipeg, and I'm excited to see it return. All right, next up we have Tampa Bay versus Toronto. This is a series I've been waiting to see pretty much my whole life, even back in the days when these teams were bad, due to the fact that I know a lot of Leafs fans. But that being said, I really do think that the Lightning take this one as well. The Lightning have pretty much dominated the Leafs for the past couple of years. I know that it's, the Leafs do take some wins, but I definitely think that the Lightning do appear to be the better team, and when the Leafs outshoot them and look like the better team, then Vasilevsky decides to pull a crazy performance. Like that one performance early in the year, which I truly think is one of the best goaltending performances in a game in a long time, considering not only did Vasilevsky make possibly a top 10 save of all time, as pictured here, but it was also just a crazy dominant game. 1 goal on 45 shots, returning from an injury. That was insane. I'm going to take the Lightning in 6, so I think the Leafs will put up a fight, but I mean, these are the Lightning that are the President's Trophy winners and also tied the all-time record for most wins in a single season. It's going to be hard to beat this team, but we know that everything's possible in the NHL. All right, next up we have Pittsburgh versus Washington. Okay, so oddly enough, even though I think Pittsburgh and Washington are both really dominant teams this year, I really think that Washington cleans this one up. I think that this is something that Washington wants to do, and I think there's that motivation to beat Crosby. Not only that, but the Penguins have been progressing and becoming weaker. The defense has been looking weaker. Now, granted, they've seen some bright spots. They've made some moves this year, which haven't been too bad, especially the trade with the Panthers, getting McCann and Bukestad kind of refreshed the lineup a little bit, getting rid of Brassard and Sheahan, who, I mean, were good players for them, but weren't great and a little disappointing in certain points. I know Sheahan looked better than he did in Detroit there, but Brassard definitely was not good this season for them. So I think that overall, the Penguins aren't going to win this one. I think they're going to look pretty good, but I think that the Capitals are going to take this one pretty handily because the Capitals are definitely in their point of being strong right now while the Penguins are kind of tapering out a little bit. So anyways, let's move on to Vegas versus Colorado. I'm going to take the Golden Knights in 6 here. I do think that Colorado is going to put up a fight. I think McKinnon is going to be a key piece to this team. I think Nathan McKinnon, that line in general with Rantanen and Landeskog, should Rantanen be healthy? We're kind of assuming that he will be, though, because it didn't seem like too major of an injury. You get that line out there, it's going to be dominant. But Vegas just has 2 insane lines. The first one being the Smith, Marchessault, Carlson. Their chemistry's unreal, and they've been turning it on in the second half of the season. And then you have the new acquisition line of Stasny, Stone, and Pacioretty, and their possession numbers are some of the most insane we've ever seen. And just when that line was created, the team just went on a crazy hot streak, and they were taking so many shots and just completely owning the puck. Vegas is going to be tough to beat, and I think Vegas is going to definitely take care of business here and are going to knock out the Colorado Avalanche. All right, so let's move on to the next matchup. This one's always going to be a fun one. This is kind of becoming the West's version of the Capitals and Penguins because I think these teams definitely have a few more years of being the top of this conference. Winnipeg Jets versus Nashville Predators. Both these teams are really good. That being said, I'm going to take the Jets in 6. Last year it went to 7. Again, last year was weird, and it was similar to the Bruins-Leafs series where it really didn't seem as close as a 7-game series. It kind of seemed like Winnipeg and Boston were both going to win that series no matter what from day one. But I will say this is a really, really exciting matchup, and I think that the Jets are going to take this one. I know that the Predators definitely tried to bulk up and beef up because, they couldn't really keep up with the physicality of the Jets. But I think that guys like Laine, who weren't that electric this season, are going to really turn it up. I think Kevin Hayes and everything, those guys are going to really show that they're playoff-ready players. And I think that Scheifele proved that he's a playoff guy last year by being completely dominant in the playoffs. And if he can turn it up to that level this year, absolutely they're a contender. Oh boy, so the conference finals. This is the matchup I'm looking forward to. I really hope this happens. The Lightning versus Capitals. I loved this matchup last year. I thought that was fantastic. It was terrifying. It was 2 top teams fighting, and both teams wanted to shed this label of choking, even though the Lightning aren't really that big of chokers, and they've had a lot of bad luck. But I think that the Capitals did have that, that label of being a choker as well, even though they kind of fall in the same boat where they've had to deal with a lot of bad luck as well. But I'll say this. I think that the Tampa Bay Lightning win this one, but I think this will be one of the closest, if not the closest series of the whole thing. I really do believe that Washington has that fight, and Washington now has that experience and that leadership to really push the Lightning. But last year, the Capitals were kind of in the driver's seat from day one, taking that 2-0 series lead in Tampa. And I think Tampa will be in the driver's seat for most of this, and it'll be Washington fighting against Tampa rather than Tampa fighting Washington for that spot. And I think that the Lightning will take it. All right, and next up we have the Jets versus Golden Knights. Again, a really, 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 really tough, highly contested series, I bet. I do take the Golden Knights again, though. I think that, again, we have 2 repeat conference finals. I think the conference finals will be the exact same as last year, but I do think the outcomes will be slightly different. Of course, Tampa taking it, and then I think the Golden Knights will take it again, but it will be in 7. I think the Jets will put up a better fight, but the Golden Knights are also much better this year. Adding Stasny, taking him from the Jets, and then getting Pacioretty and Mark Stone, and just everything just seems to click more. And even though they had that colder start, they definitely heated it up, especially post-trade deadline. and started becoming some serious contenders. And I really, really think, even though that the Jets are scoring in this picture, I really do think that the Golden Knights will win this one. It'll be 7, though. I think it'll be close. But the Golden Knights move on to the Stanley Cup Finals, where they will face the Tampa Bay Lightning. And that's definitely an interesting series for sure. I definitely don't think that, first of all, when the Golden Knights were announced and when they went through the expansion draft, I don't think anyone predicted that they would make the Stanley Cup Final. Not once, but twice in a row. In fact, in my video, I predicted they'd be the worst team, like, basically ever. They ended up making the Stanley Cup Finals once, and it appears they might make it twice. And they are a good team. The Golden Knights are a good team. Tampa is a good team, too. I honestly do believe that there's a lot of talent on both these teams. And, I mean, as per always, it can go either way. I think that the Lightning are just an insanely good team that just has so many good pieces, so much depth, defensive depth, forward depth, and an elite, all-time potentially elite goaltender. And they're still pretty young. They still have a lot of young players. You know, you have Braden Point, who's like 23, you know, being one of the leaders of the team. Nikita Kucherov's only like 25, 26. So they're a very young team still, and they're really going to fight, and I think that the leadership of Stamkos will be there. And the Vegas Golden Knights, of course, we saw what they were able to do last year, but I just don't think it's enough. And I do think that the Lightning are the Stanley Cup champions. I think they're going to win in 6 games. I think that the Lightning have proven that they are an all-time elite team, and now they have to win that cup, and I think there's going to be a lot of motivation because there is that label of choker, and they want to shed that, and they want to have one of the most dominant seasons ever. It'll be similar to the Warriors run, I think, of 2016, but I really do think that the Lightning are going to definitely dominate, and I just can't see any team, except for maybe the Washington Capitals. That is the one team that Lightning should be scared of. I can't really see any team beating this team in 7 games, and maybe I'm biased and all, but I just really think that this is going to happen this year for sure. I've been wanting it to happen for all my life, but I think this will be the year, and I'm really looking forward to that. But if not, definitely going to be a fun playoffs. There's a lot of teams that can win. Washington can win. I think that the Toronto-Boston series winner can win. I think that Vegas can win. San Jose can win. Winnipeg can win. Either the winner of the Winnipeg-St. Louis and the Winnipeg-Nashville. There's so many teams that can win this year, and I'm looking forward to it. Even Calgary can, even though I'm not as high on Calgary as a lot of people. I really do think this is going to be a great season, though, or a great playoffs. It was a great season, and I'm excited to see how it ends. All right, guys, thank you for watching this video. Let me know what your thoughts are below. Subscribe for more content. A lot of music content on here, but also some hockey content will be on its way, and I'll see you guys all later. Goodbye, everybody.